Wow. Thank you guys so much for an incredible 2023. I couldn't have done any of this without your love, your support. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys and ladies so much for all of your support, not only in 2023, prior, and hopefully moving 2024. For anybody who's new to the channel, thank you, welcome. I can't, again, thank you guys enough for all of the support, all the comments, all of the video sharing, really everything. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for a fantastic 2023.
Up to the very last song, and I'm the one that gets to take it home. I ain't gonna miss that party, no way, no way.
Before we dive into this, my criteria is relatively small. However, I wanted to make this a list of bourbons that at the time of release were somewhat available or are still available as of the recording of this video here at the end of 2023. I didn't want to make this a list of every single highly allocated bottle or bottles that are relatively unobtainable. A list like that for me is just something that I didn't want this to be a list of just BTACs, Pappy, any of these bottles that are extremely highly allocated and or almost unobtainable. To me, just isn't how I want to make my top bourbon of 2023 list. Again, nothing against any other channel. That's just me and my preference and how I want to really break this down. So again, I tried to look at it from the standpoint of somewhat availability, the general or overall profile of it, factor in the age, and again, the availability factor as well. So that is my criteria for my top bourbons of 2023. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at my number 5 bourbon of 2023. My number 5 bourbon of 2023 goes to Ben Holladay, and this specifically being your Ben Holladay Rickhouse Proof rye-based bourbon. They do also have a wheated, but this one just really stood out to me in every fantastic way. I loved the balance. I loved how it really just all mingled very well together. The baking spices, the chocolates, the brown sugars, just everything checked every box for me about this bourbon. And again, this is one that is kind of newly introduced here in 2023 and will be going forward into 2024. But again, what they did with this release specifically, and this being the Ben Holladay Rickhouse Proof, just it kind of spoke to me, and I love the general availability of it. I know it's not a huge distribution, and hopefully it will become distributed a little bit more, but at $70, generally available. Great proof, 120.1 proof. Again, it just hit all of those marks, checked a lot of the boxes of a bourbon that I absolutely love. And as you can see, I've done a little bit of damage on it, and it's an easy sipping. As easy a sipping as 120.1 proof can be, this is it. So if you haven't had anything from Ben Holladay Distillery, do yourself a favor. If you can find the Rickhouse Proof, I would highly, highly recommend this bottle. And that's why it's my number 5 bourbon of 2023. Now let's go ahead and take a look at my number 4 bourbon of 2023. So my number 4 bourbon of 2023 goes to the Larceny Batch A123. This came in at 125.8 proof, was right in that $65-ish price point, was generally available. These have become releases that over the past year or two have become, generally speaking, easier to get. So if it's something you're looking for and something that you want, for the most part, it should be a bottle that you can find. It was a tough call between the A and C batch for me here in 2023. But what I loved about the A batch was this kind of creamy strawberry, nice oak, great spices on it, soft, felt a little bit like a strawberry pastry type of profile. And it was something that just resonated with me. So for me, the Larceny Batch A123 is my number 4 bourbon of 2023. So let's go ahead and talk now about my number 3 bourbon of 2023. Yes, you are not seeing things. I have 2 bottles here, one a sample and one an actual bottle. This being the Barrell Batch number 34, this being K-Luke Batch number 4. Why I have these as 3 and 3A? For 2 reasons. Generally, I want to have a full bottle, but I was not able to get or find the actual full bottle of the K-Luke Batch 4. It was just one of those bottles that eluded me, and I was never able to get one throughout the year. So I worked off of this sample from K-Luke, again, Batch 4. And this bottle here, this was also an easy 3 and 3A for me for one other reason, and that is the blending behind these bottles. Barrell Craft Spirits, obviously we all know they're masters at blending. And again, what they've done with some of their prior batches, I just love the progression of how each of these batches are really progressing. And for me, what it was about batch 34, coming in at 117.5 proof, it is age stated as 6 years old, but it's blends of 6, 7, 8, and 13-year-old whiskeys. So you've got all of these different components that made up, for me, an absolute beautiful blend. It worked extremely well together. I loved all of the richness, complexity, all of those beautiful baking spices, the sweetness that it had. All of these were layered extremely well. Now, when we're talking about blending, what Jonathan Maizano is doing with K-Luke, again, represented for me, batch 4 as my favorite batch of 2023. Again, like I mentioned, at 117.7 proof, blends of Indiana and Kentucky bourbons, both high and low rye. That's not something that is easily blended. So the attention to detail and knowing what it is you're doing and how to blend, for me, made this batch 4 absolutely fantastic. And it's why I've got Barrell Craft Spirits batch 34, K-Luke batch 4 as my number 3 and 3A bourbons of 2023. All right, we are coming down to my number 1 and number 2 bourbons of 2023. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at my number 2 bourbon of 2023. Well, my number 2 bourbon of 2023 goes to Foregate and their Kelvin 60. Most of you all know that I'm a huge fan of what it is that Foregate does. I'm a huge fan of the people behind the brand, and this was extremely tough. I had gone back and forth between this and my number 1 all year, and it's just gotten to the point where I started to factor in a little bit of the availability, the pricing, things along those lines. So for me, when I had an opportunity to first try the Kelvin 60, this was roughly in October of 2023, and it absolutely blew me away at that time. And I knew that this was going to be a bourbon that was going to factor somehow into my top 5 bourbons of 2023. So the Kelvin 60 came in at 125.6 proof. It is age stated as 8 years old, and it is essentially a double oaked bourbon. That in itself is allowing for that extra or additional richness, complexity. For me, this thing had tons and tons of brown sugars, really nice sweet creme brulees, great baking spices, some chocolate notes, heavier kind of rich dark berry notes. This thing checked every single box for me. And again, it was extremely difficult to choose between this and ultimately my number 1 bourbon of 2023. And with that being said, my number 2 bourbon of 2023 goes to Foregate and the Kelvin 60. We have come down to the pinnacle for me of my number 1 bourbon of 2023. And you may have guessed at this point without seeing what's been placed on the table so far. You probably guessed it. And my number 1 bourbon of 2023 goes to, you guessed it, Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Batch C923. This bourbon came in at 133 proof, 13 years, 7 months, priced at about $75, makes this, in my opinion, maybe the best overall value in bourbon today. What this represents as a bourbon overall makes this almost the perfect bourbon. And when I tasted it, I knew almost immediately this was going to be an extremely, extremely difficult bourbon to beat out this year. Now, again, I'm not comparing this to George T. Staggs or BTAX, things along those lines. Again, just because of the general inability for people to get that. This is a bottle that, for the most part, is obtainable. You can find these. They release quite a few of these bottles. So again, it's making this release much more available to all of us to find somewhere, either on the shelf, at your favorite liquor store, whatever it may be. But again, it was a bottle that was much more obtainable than the vast majority of some of these others that are out there. But overall, this feels like, to me, the perfect bourbon. If you could tell someone or describe that perfect barrel proof bourbon, this would be it. It really checked every single box for me, from general availability, price, the complexity, the flavor profile of this. It just hit every single mark. And for me, that's why the Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Batch C923 is my #1 bourbon of 2023. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. Like I mentioned earlier on in the video, I couldn't do any of this without your love, your support. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of that. I look forward to a strong 2024, and I'm looking forward to seeing each and every single one of you in the comments. So again, thank you so much for everything. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to follow me, you can on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those places at My Bourbon Journey. If you'd like to help support the channel and become part of the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club, make sure you check out the Patreon link in the description below. A lot of other great things down there for you as well. So like I say, it is about the journey and not the destination. Thank you again for a fantastic 2023. We'll see you in 2024. Cheers.
Gonna light it up to the very last.